for the 8th year in a row, welcome to my Grand Final preview. It's 2024 and this year's Grand Final is between the Sydney Swans and the Brisbane Lions. There has never been an AFL Grand Final between these two sides in their current form. But if you go back 125 years ago to 1899, there was a Grand Final between the Fitzroy Lions and South Melbourne, where the Lions came out victorious by just a single point. This year's Grand Final is about redemption. Either Sydney get redemption for their embarrassment of 2 years ago, or Brisbane get their own redemption for their 4-point loss just last year. Whoever wins this one, it's one brilliant story, but how did they both get here? Let's start with Sydney. They won a magnificent 13 of their first 14 games. Melbourne opening round, statement victory. Premiers Collingwood, a big win at the G. Essendon, no problem. Richmond, no problem. Wait, Richmond? They lost to Richmond? Their one loss in 14 games was Richmond? 18th place Boone winners. Sorry, this is a serious video. West Coast, no worries. And after a bye round, they played Gold Coast, and there was no problems there. Struggling 1-win Hawthorn, 76 points victory. GWS in the Derby, huge victory. Fremantle, defeated. Carlton, defeated. The Bulldogs, defeated. And a second bye round came along, and then they played Geelong. Were they a problem? No, they were not. The Crows, defeated. The Giants, big derby victory once again, and then the troubles came along. 2 consecutive small margin losses came along. A loss to Fremantle by just a point and a 2-point loss to the St Kilda Saints. But their troubles were only beginning. Despite a win against North Melbourne, they proceeded to lose another close one to inform Brisbane. A convincing defeat to the Dogs followed, and then Port Adelaide embarrassed them by 112 points. Now it was suddenly 5 losses in 6 games. After winning 13 of the first 14, it was 5 losses in 6. People start to doubt them once again. Is their season falling apart? They got smashed in the Grand Final 2 years ago. They didn't really recover the following season despite making finals. They were finally back to strength, finally playing well this season, and suddenly this bad run of form comes along. Was it a mental struggle? Something behind the scenes? They needed to respond in the last 3 rounds, and they did just that. A 3-point victory over Collingwood from being 27 points down in the last quarter, which was a big show of mentality and determination. They followed this up with comfortable victories over Essendon and Adelaide to secure their minor premiership. But the finals is really where they needed to prove themselves, especially after the demise of 2022. Their first test was against the Giants, a rival they've never beaten in finals in 3 previous attempts. They were 28 points down and managed an incredible comeback in the final quarter. They followed it up with a commanding victory over Port Adelaide in the preliminary final. They hadn't beaten Port Adelaide in 8 years, and they broke that streak too, and now they've got another shot at the big one. But what of their opponents? This one is also a comeback story, a story where a team looked like they were down and out and came back strong, all within one season. They won just 4 of their first 12 games, a very similar start to the Giants the previous year. A horrifying start after just losing out on the trophy last year. A comeback loss to Carlton in the opening round, their first Gabba loss since 2022, followed by a loss to Freo in Perth and a bye round. Another loss to Collingwood came at home again, but they managed to get 2 wins against the Kangaroos and the D's. However, more defeats came at the hands of Geelong and the Giants. They did beat Gold Coast, drew with Adelaide and smashed Richmond, but Hawthorn took them down again. 4 wins, 3 against struggling teams and an underperforming Melbourne. Their season should be over, right? Not so fast. After the second bye round, the Lion awakes from its slumber. The next 9 opponents would feel their wrath. The Bulldogs were the first to become prey. The Saints scored 106 points, still defeated. Port Adelaide, 79-point victory. Melbourne, defeated. The Crows, defeated. West Coast, defeated. Sydney, defeated. Gold Coast, no problem. St Kilda returned. They were defeated again, but 2 losses would follow. A loss at home to the Giants after a lot of bad kicking, and a loss to Collingwood at the MCG. 2 consecutive losses after winning 9 in a row. It definitely hurts, especially considering that second loss was against a struggling Collingwood, but also a Collingwood side that they lost the Premiership flag to in the previous year. And it was also at the MCG, a ground where they don't do so well at. Just like there were questions with Sydney after losing so many games, there was also questions with the Brisbane Lions. Can they win at the MCG? If they can't play well there, they cannot win the Premiership. It's something they had to fix. Was it just a purple patch? They won 9 games in a row, but was it just a simple case of a good run of form and nothing more? and was the damage done in the first half of the season? With just one regular season round to go and finals looming, Brisbane would miss out on top 4. They would end the season with a victory over struggling Essendon, which wasn't so convincing and ended their season in 5th place. They needed to prove themselves in finals. Struggling Carlton were up first, and they found themselves 60 points ahead just before half time. The damage was already done, but it didn't perform so well in the second half and won by 28. It should have been a lot more. They still needed to prove themselves and knew they wouldn't play at the Gabba again. The Giants away is a very tough second week game, and Brisbane found themselves 44 points down in the third quarter. Were Brisbane done again? Was this their last chance to the Premiership from the recent era? Surely the comeback is extremely unlikely. Well, the Lion awakens again. Astonishingly, from 44 points down, they managed to complete the comeback and win by a few points, kicking very accurately compared to previous rounds, which was the deciding factor in winning that game. It was a truly incredible comeback, one of the great finals comebacks, and they finally showed that they are here and they're here to stay. But they still had the MCG curse. The fact that they couldn't perform well enough and get enough results at the MCG was definitely hanging over their heads. They knew that the next test was Geelong at the MCG, waiting for them in the next round. Just 2 years ago, when Geelong won the Premiership against Sydney, they also beat Brisbane by a comfortable margin in the prelim. Brisbane needed to turn up and prove themselves and show why they are ready for a Premiership. Could they carry that momentum of the 44-point comeback in Sydney to the MCG against a rested and strong Geelong? Well, it didn't start so well in the first half. Geelong played very well in the first half and throughout the game. By half-time, it didn't look too much like Brisbane would get the victory. Geelong gained a 25 points lead in the second half, but Brisbane were not down and out yet, and they had to come back from 25 points down at the MCG this week. Some would say possibly a tougher task considering how the game was going and the ground they were playing at, but they managed to fight back and come back again. Just like in the previous week, they pulled off another brilliant comeback, and despite the fact that it looked like they might lose when Geelong went ahead through Ollie Henry with 2 minutes to go, the Lions still managed to fight back and get 2 deciding goals thereafter to win a truly incredible preliminary final in one of the games of the year. And then there were 2. This is the first interstate final since 2006, although these 2 of course have Victorian roots, Sydney from South Melbourne and Fitzroy Lions merging with the Brisbane Bears. Of course, there's plenty of Victorian history with both of these teams, but it's still factually right now an interstate grand final between 2 teams that are looking for redemption from their recent losses, and 2 teams that are looking for glory. 2 teams where whoever wins would make a great story. Brisbane from 5th place, having won just 4 of their first 12 games, losing the grand final by just 4 points last season, managing to get to the grand final from their season possibly being over halfway through the season against the Sydney side that has recovered so well from their embarrassment 2 years ago and are back for redemption. A Sydney side has been the best team for most of the year against a Brisbane side that was one of the best teams for most of last year. It is time to find out which team gets redemption and which team goes home in misery. Brisbane have played 5 grand finals since the Bears merged with Fitzroy, 4 of them in a row, a three-peat between 01 and 03, and a grand final loss to Port Adelaide in 2004. Of course, they made it last year of 2 and only just missed out to the mighty Magpies. Meanwhile, the Sydney Swans have played 7 grand finals in the last 20 years, which is a magnificent record, and they have won just 2 of those grand finals. There has not been many interstate grand finals. They tend to involve one of these 2 grand finalists from this year: 04 Port v Brisbane and 05 and 06 West Coast v Sydney. And this grand final is as good as they come. It's highly anticipated, but who will win? Who gets their redemption story? Who goes home with the misery of the 2 recent heartbreaking grand final results? Will it be the first team to lose 2 straight grand finals since St Kilda? Or the first team to lose the last 4 grand finals since St Kilda? It's time to find out in a showdown in Melbourne. 125 years in the making, the Lions and the Swans, and Katy Perry. Who will win? We'll find out on Saturday.